After back-to-back massive series losses in the wild card race, the Orioles' season, or at least their playoff chances, seem to be on life support.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, August 13th, 2026, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we will recap a quite crushing 7-5 Orioles loss to the Twins on Wednesday afternoon as they lose the rubber match and fall in this series in the Twin Cities. I'll chat about Shane Baz having his worst start in a while and the Orioles offense cooking early and going cold late. We'll talk about what it means for this season overall. These were gigantic series in Texas, in Minnesota, against wildcard contenders they were chasing, and they lost both series on the road. It really does put the Orioles on the brink. And then we'll chat about another prospect the Orioles got as the player to be named later in the Adley Rutschman deal. But we begin with an Orioles loss on Wednesday afternoon. What I called the biggest game of the year for the Orioles, that's what it felt like. But unfortunately, it ended with a 7-5 loss to the Minnesota Twins as the Orioles lose the series, dropping 2 out of 3 at Minnesota. The O's are now 58-63 on the season. This will be pending, whatever happens in Anaheim tonight, game 3 between the Rangers and the Angels. Again, Angels picked up a big win for the O's on Tuesday night. If the Angels can win again, the Orioles will still only be 2 games back. If Texas wins, it'll be 3 games back of that final wild card spot. But now you have potentially Toronto jumping the Orioles. You still got the Mariners right there. You've got Cleveland and Detroit. And obviously Minnesota has moved up a little further ahead of the O's. It's getting late early here in mid-August. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles loss on Wednesday afternoon. And the first thing you need to know is Shane Baz unfortunately had one of his worst starts of the season. And Baz had been pitching really well lately and really hadn't been getting much run support at all. I mean, the biggest example is his first career complete game. He goes 8 innings, 2 runs against the Rangers on Friday night, and the Orioles lose that game 2-1. And you couldn't ask for much better starting pitching from Shane Baz in that game, and yet the Orioles just couldn't score. So this time, the O's get him 4 runs in the first 3 innings, and you're like, hey, this is a chance. If you pitch half as well as you have lately, we could be in a good spot here. Well, that's not what happened because Baz allowed a 4 spot in the bottom of the 3rd inning that ended his day, and it ends up being his worst Orioles start. 3 innings, 5 runs, 9 hits, 2 Ks, 1 walk, no homers, only 65 pitches for Shane Baz when he was removed from this game. But honestly, it felt like the right move, especially since the Orioles had the off day coming up here on Thursday the next day. They could feel a little bit better about emptying the bullpen, trying to win this game. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but also they didn't have to use all of their high leverage guys. It just was a weird day for Baz. And again, like the struggles continued, missing bats in the zone. That seems to be his number one issue. I talked about how it's been better over the past 5 starts, but it's really fluctuated. And he ended up getting only 1 in-zone swing and miss. I mean, everything got put in play. His 2 strikeouts were the final 2 batters he faced in this game. The Twins already had 4 runs in the inning, and they had second and third with 1 out, and he got back-to-back Ks to at least keep it just a 5-4 game and get out of the jam. But both the changeup and the curveball just stayed up too often when he was throwing them to all the Twins left-handed hitters they had in the lineup. Those got hit. I mean, in that 3rd inning, 6 of the first 7 Twins hitters in the inning got a hit. It was 6 hits and a sac fly to the first 7 batters. I mean, they weren't crushing the ball, right? They didn't hit homers. It wasn't a ton of extra base hits. It was just perfect contact for a ton of singles, and it was death by 1,000 cuts for Shane Baz. And again, like 1 in-zone whiff, that has been his issue this year. And it ends up being by far his shortest start of the season at just 3 innings. Next shortest was 4 1/3. And it's just the 4th time this year for Shane Baz in 24 starts in which he has failed to complete 5 innings. He's really been an innings eater. He's been like top 10 to 15 in innings all year in Major League Baseball. This 3-inning start is not going to help. And obviously the results are bad, right? His command was off. He wasn't in the strike zone enough. He hung some changeups. He hung some curveballs that he was trying to bury. It was a confluence of bad things for Baz that leads to his worst start of the year at unfortunately the worst time. But what concerned me more than anything was the velocity. Baz has been sitting 96 miles an hour with his 4-seam fastball this year. He averaged 94 miles an hour. He was down 2 total ticks on the fastball in this start. His changeup was down only 3 ticks. The sinker was down 1 mile per hour. Everything across the board was down. And specifically that fastball velocity is the one that you're always going to look at. I mean, at 94.0, that is the lowest average fastball velocity in a start in Shane Baz's career. We're not just talking about of this season. His big league career, which dates back to 2021, lowest fastball velocity by far. There was one start, August 31st of 2024, when he averaged 94.4 on the fastball. There have only been 2 other starts where he was even in the 94s. He had a 94.8 and a 94.9 in that 2024 season. Otherwise, he's been 95 or above on average with his 4-seamer in every start of his career. So for him not just to be that far down in this season, but in his whole career is concerning. Now, Baz was asked about it after the game, and Craig Abernathy said, it wasn't injury why he removed Baz after 3 innings and only 65 pitches. It was because the Twins were all over him and he was just getting crushed. And it was still a 1-run game. And the O's were like, he's going to get crushed more. Let's get this bullpen in here and see if they can keep it close, because the offense was still looking good at that point, and you felt like they would score some more runs as the game went on. So it made sense to pull him after the 3rd. But, Baz said he didn't feel like it was an injury. He just said something felt wrong. It maybe how I read that is something mechanically was off rather than injury-wise, which is the preferred outcome of this. You don't want him to be hurt. But either way, that's concerning, because even if it is a mechanical thing, you got to work on that to fix it before your next start, because these games are important. And he had just been so good lately, and to have this happen, it was concerning. It was frustrating. It was a rough time for the Orioles. Second thing you need to know from Wednesday is that, got to say, though, kudos to the Twins for one of the best offensive games that I have seen, because they didn't do it with power, right? They scored 7 runs. They did not hit a homer. They had 14 hits. They did not hit a homer. It was, there were some extra base hits in there. Royce Lewis had 2 doubles. Alan Roden had 2 doubles. So it wasn't like it was all singles, but 10 of the 14 hits were singles. It's not like they were hitting the ball over the fence and crushing it into the gaps, but they were hitting balls hard, putting them into the gap, taking pitches out of the zone, swinging at good pitches to hit in the zone, and they just really had a perfect approach. I mean, the Twins did not have a hit in the final 3 innings. They had 7 runs on 14 hits through 5 innings against this Oriole pitching staff. I mean, Cam Sanders and Yarmiel Geraldo came in. The Twins got 2 more runs off them in the 5th to extend the lead. And I mean, if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, this is a chart from Baseball Savant. These are all the pitches the Twins had their 14 hits on in Wednesday's game. And look at this. I mean, yeah, there's some balls that got way too much in the middle of the plate that even solid hitters are going to turn into base hits, and that's what we saw from the Twins. But they were equal opportunity hitters, right? There were things up and away, down and in, up and in that they got on, high in the zone, low in the zone, 4 different pitches, fastball, changeup, knuckle curve, splitter. They were all over different pitches, whether it was Baz or Geraldo or Cam Sanders. It was mostly Shane Baz. Again, he gave up 9 of those hits, which also tied a season high. The Twins were on it. I mean, you don't see an offense locked in like this that often. And it was just crazy to see them continue to do it. I mean, they hit everything. Alan Roden's first career 3-hit game, sure, for the Twins. I mean, only Alex Hoppe in the 7th and Albert Suarez in the 8th, who both threw scoreless frames out of the bullpen to keep it 7-4, were able to figure out the Twins' offense. Everybody else had a bit of a tough time. Third thing you need to know from Wednesday's loss is that Dylan Beavers finally hit a home run. His 3-run shot on a hanging curveball from Twin starter Zebby Matthews in the 3rd inning, what Ben McDonald called a Beaver Weaver, which I loved, gave the Orioles a 4-1 lead at the time. For Dylan Beavers, his first home run since April 24th. Now, he had a long stint on the IL with an oblique injury in there, but it's been over 150 plate appearances since his last homer. But since he returned from the IL with that oblique, he was activated on June 28th. He has not been good. A 73 WRC plus. This was entering Wednesday's game. Just an 8% walk rate, 27% strikeout rate, only 5 total extra base hits and no homers in that stretch. I mean, even if you look at since his last home run on April 24th, an 82 WRC plus and a 299 slugging percentage since that last homer. He's not doing damage. Remember, even when he first came up last year, he was walking at an insane rate. That's not happening anymore. He's not putting the ball in play as much as you want. He's striking out more. And he's really, really shaky out in the outfield defensively. It has not been a good sophomore campaign for Dylan Beavers, but it was huge to see him with this swing. Getting literally anything from him would be nice. His first extra base hit in August was that home run, and that was certainly nice to see. Fourth thing you need to know from the loss, though, is that the Orioles offense just kind of went silent after that. After the Beavers home run came with 1 out in the 3rd inning, they did not have another base runner until the 7th. 13 in a row were retired. Then they did draw two out walks in the 7th to rally, but did not score. Unfortunately, nice play was made on a Jackson Holiday liner that looked destined for a 2-run single. Their only other hit in the game was the Leody Taveras leadoff home run in the 9th inning. They made it a 7-5 game, and they tried to rally. Christian Franklin followed it up with a walk. He had 2 in the game. And then, of course, Colton Cowser hits a ball hard right back at the pitcher. It's caught and is lined into a double play because, well, that's the kind of luck that the Baltimore Orioles have had this season. It does give the O's 4 straight games scoring at least 5 runs. 5 runs is kind of the magic number you want to at least get to every time out there. And the offense is looking better after a putrid start to August, but you got to keep the pressure on, right? You get 4 runs in 3 innings, you're all over the Twins, then you just go silent. And it's just the 3rd time this season they've scored 5 or more in 4 straight games, so a solid stretch by the offense, but you got to be able to pick up your pitchers at sometimes. And Pete Alonso, the only one with a multi-hit game. He had a couple of singles, they were hot early, and then they just kind of went cold there, which you didn't need. 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 7-5 loss to the Twins on Wednesday to drop this hugely important series is that Joel Pozo is somehow mostly okay. Remember, Pozo was the starting catcher on Tuesday night, got hit in the glove hand by a bat on a catcher's interference, a weird swing by Josh Bell, had swelling in his hand, came out of the game, but the x-rays were negative. I thought for sure, though, as I talked about on yesterday's episode, the Orioles would just have to activate a catcher. Even if Pozo didn't go on the IL, I was like, his hand doesn't look good. He's probably not going to be available for at least a couple of days. You don't want to go with one healthy catcher. They're going to activate somebody. Thought it would be Silas Ardway, who was already there on the taxi squad. But no, Narvaez started again. And Albie said before the game, Pozo was available off the bench if the Orioles needed him. And they were going to go to him because in the 9th inning, when Colton Cowser lined into that double play, he was pinch hitting there for Carlos Narvaez, which means if the O's tied it or took the lead, Joel Pozo is going to come out there and catch a very important bottom of the 9th inning, which tells me they had enough faith in him being able to do it. So at least it's nice it's not another serious catcher injury. We've seen plenty of those from the Orioles over the past 2 years. But, yeah, not a win for the O's. Small victory as Pozo's okay, but they have much bigger fish to fry at this point. The biggest one is wondering, is this thing over? Mathematically, obviously, this thing is not over, right? They're 58 and 63. They've played 121 games now. Is that good math by Connor? I think it is. Yeah, 121 games. They still got 41 games remaining on the schedule. They still got a month and a half of baseball to play. At worst, they'll wake up today 3 games back of the final wildcard spot. Obviously, mathematically, that team is in it. But these 2 series against the Rangers and Twins were huge, and they lost both of them. So where does that put the Orioles now? We'll chat about that up next. But first, I want to thank our friends at Amazon for this limited ad break. This back-to-school season, spend less on your kids with Amazon. We all know how crazy the back-to-school shopping experience can be. Starts with a few items on the list, and suddenly you're shopping for supplies, clothes, lunch gear, tech, and about 10 other things you didn't see coming. It really adds up fast, right? That growth spurt can come in where you buy a bunch of new clothes for back-to-school, then a month later, the growth spurt hits. They grow 4 inches, nothing fits anymore. You're right back to square one. Those clothes can get expensive. unless you go and get them on Amazon. That'll help out with the budget. And then there's that teacher list, right? Like you get this big list and you're like, yeah, everything makes sense that they need. Then you add it all up and you're like, how much stuff do they need? Amazon helps keep those prices low. So remember, Amazon's low back to school prices. Just spend less on your kids because every dollar you don't spend on them is a dollar you haven't spent on them. Shop back to school at Amazon and spend less on your kids. So it really was a massive loss for the Orioles on Wednesday. Falling 7-5 to the Twins, they lose this series 2 out of 3, just like they lost the series 2 out of 3 in Texas against the Rangers over the weekend. And, they had won that series against the Angels at home, really felt like they needed a sweep, but they at least got 2 out of 3 after the sell-off at last Monday's trade deadline. And I talked about going into last weekend, like, these are 2 gigantic series. You have both the Rangers holding the final AL wildcard spot, the Twins right behind them, ahead of the Orioles in this wildcard race. You don't get this good of chances all the time to play the teams that are right in front of you, where the wins count for 2 because it guarantees a loss for the team you're chasing and makes it a lot easier to move up in the standings. And I basically said, look, the Orioles really need to find a way to go 4-2 in these 6 games, preferably by winning both series, even if it is just 2 out of 3. And they didn't do that. They got 1 out of 3. They went 2-4 overall, and they fall further back from both the Rangers that they're chasing and the Twins who are still ahead of them. And again, it doesn't knock them out. At worst, they'll still be 3 back. You still have 41 baseball games to play. It's still August. They're mathematically in a playoff race. But you just felt like this was their best chance to do it. That's kind of how it felt here, because you look at the schedule coming up and you start to get worried about it. And the reason why I said this was such a big stretch is not just because you have the teams right in front of you. The Rangers and the Twins are going to be chasing those guys down for the rest of the year. Last chance to get either of them. You don't play them again. It's that what comes after, right? After the off day here today on Thursday, the O's go to Tampa for a 4-game wraparound Friday to Monday series. The Rays refuse to lose. They just swept the A's in Sacramento. The A's are a disaster, but the Rays now have, as of Wednesday night, the best record in Major League Baseball. They just jumped the Brewers on Wednesday. They are playing the best baseball I've seen from the Rays in a while. Then you come home for 3 against the Yankees, who aren't playing as well, and they don't have Aaron Judge, they don't have Cody Bellinger, and they're not 100%. They're beatable, but they're still certainly a big-time playoff team right now. And then guess what you have at the end of that homestand? It's the Rays again for 3 more at home. You go Rays, Yankees, Rays for 10 games starting tomorrow. That could define this season, right? Like, obviously the Orioles go on some awesome 8-2 stretch against really good teams. Well, they're right back in it. But the Orioles could just as easily go 2-8 against these teams that are much better than them and be complete toast. And that's the thing, they'll likely go 4-6 or 5-5. And it'll be nice to see them hold their own against these guys. But it's if you go 5-5, you're still 10 games later into the season and right where you are. You need to be playing over 500 baseball for the rest of the way. You need to be winning as many series as possible. And have Rays, Yankees, Rays doesn't set that up well. So even if you do go 5-5, you feel solid probably about the way you played, but you're not going to be much closer to a playoff spot. And I just think unless the Orioles can win at the very least 6 of these 10 games, and preferably 7 of the 10, they're not really going to be in a good spot. Now, the schedule does ease up a little bit after that. After an off day on August 24th, they hit the road for a 9-game road trip, but it's against the Cardinals, who are falling further and further out of the NL playoff race. It's in Sacramento against the A's, who are a complete disaster. And then it's in Colorado for 3 against the Rockies, who are once again not very good this year. That's kind of your final chance to keep yourself in it, is those 3 series. So again, if you can tread water and you do go 5-5 Rays, Yankees, Rays, if you do go on a 7-2 burst on that road trip, you're probably still in this playoff race, because I don't think these Rangers and Twins and whatnot teams are really that good. But then you're staring September in the face. After you finish that Rockies series, Red Sox for 4, Guardians for 3. That's 2 playoff teams, or at least hopeful playoff teams right now. Blue Jays for 3, playing a lot better. They're about to jump the Orioles in the standings. Mets for 3. You got to take advantage of that, but it's going to be emotional. Pete Alonso goes back to Citi Field. And then you finish the year 3 at home against the Brewers, 3 at home against the Blue Jays, 3 at the Yankees. It is not an easy September. This September is one of the big reasons why last week I talked about how the Orioles had the toughest remaining schedule in the American League to finish off the year. And your playoff odds were 9.9% at Fangraphs as of Wednesday afternoon after the Orioles loss. And because there's so many teams jumbled up, you also start to think about tiebreakers, right? Baseball no longer does a game 163 tiebreaker game if two teams are tied for a playoff spot at the end of the year, whether it's divisional or wild card. The tiebreaker just goes to head-to-head record. If the head-to-head record is tied, then they go to some other things to break it down. But looking at all the other teams who are theoretically in the wild card race right now with the Orioles, they've now lost the season series to the Rangers. They don't have that tiebreaker. This makes them 3-3 against the Twins. So that would go to a second tiebreaker. They're currently 1-3 against the Guardians. So they would need to sweep that September series against the Gardos to have that tiebreaker. They are 4-2 against the White Sox, which is nice. Although the White Sox are a first place team right now, but they're kind of falling a bit. They are 4-2 against the Tigers, which is helpful. The Tigers are surging. They're 5-1 against the Astros, which is nice. Again, the Astros only have a 1-game lead over the Rangers, so they could very easily be in the wild card race. 3-4 against the Mariners is tough. And then they're 3-4 against the Blue Jays, but they do have 6 games remaining against Toronto to turn that around. So, there are 4 teams they will have, 3 teams they'll have the tiebreaker against, and 2 teams they could still give themselves the tiebreaker against. So it's still possible to be in this. It just does feel like, as I said at the top, that it's kind of on life support because you wasted your best chance in these Rangers and Twins series to beat the teams that are right in front of you. Again, looking at the rest of that schedule, maybe those 2 Blue Jays series will be big because they're kind of back in the race now, even after semi-selling at the deadline. And you do have the home series against the Guardians, but I don't think you're really chasing the Red Sox anymore. You're not really chasing the Yankees. I just think you're too far back. You're obviously not chasing the Rays for the division. Mets are an NL team. Brewers are an NL team. So you're really looking at the 9 games, 6 against the Blue Jays, 3 against the Guardians, where you can right in front of you potentially make up ground against a wild card team ahead of you. And chances are neither of those teams will actually be in that final wild card spot because the Guardians and Blue Jays are a little further back right around the Orioles, whereas, the Tigers and the Rangers and the Twins are a little bit closer now to that top spot. So it doesn't knock them out. It doesn't mean the season is dead. I know I said if they lost this Twin series, I'd declare it dead, but I guess I'll give them one more chance to show themselves against some good teams over the next 10 days. And they might go 3-7 in these next 10 and still be in the race because the AL slop stinks. And then they get 9 games against bad teams. They play well and they're still in it in September. That's totally a possibility. It's hard to declare them fully dead because we're still early enough in the season. But I just think we will look back on these 2 series as the final chance they had to make a move. And again, they could have won Wednesday's game, right? They could have won the Friday opener in Texas when Leody Taveras was thrown out the plate in the 9th inning and they had some chances. They could have won these 2 series, which would have been huge, and they didn't get it done. And now you have your back against the wall, and 7 of your next 10 games are against the team with the best record in baseball that has already swept you one time this season. And even the Yankee team that they did beat in the series once, they also were mopped by the Yankees earlier this year. So it could all come down to this. Won't say it's going to be done and dusted after these 10 games, but if it doesn't go well, it might really not go well. But guess what? I'm still going to have a tiny, tiny bit of faith. I'm still going to be tracking scores of other wildcard teams around the American League to hope and hope and hope the Orioles can somehow find a way to just keep themselves in this wild card race. But if they do fall out of it, even further than they are right now, we will continue to look towards the future. And the future got a wee bit brighter on Wednesday because we learned an even further return in the Adley Rutschman trade. That's after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just to make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now, you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. Now, obviously the O's aren't playing today. They got an off day here on Thursday, but I can still make a Daily Dingers pick. And where do I want to go here with my Daily Dingers? I feel like you maybe take a good, here we go. Field of Dreams game is tonight. That's probably a ballpark that the ball's going to fly out of. I can't imagine it's a giant ballpark. You got the Phillies and the Twins in the Field of Dreams game. It just feels right that Kyle Schwarber would go deep in that game. So I'm going to take Schwarber for my Daily Dinger. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of MLB. Wanted to finish things off today with another new prospect in the Orioles system. If you remember back, as I try not to, but if you remember back to the Orioles trading Adley Rutschman to the Boston Red Sox last Monday at the deadline, they received 4 players, right? It was the 3 prospects, I should say. They ended up with Kyson Witherspoon and Anthony Ianson, 2 exciting pitchers. They ended up with Endy Azokar, a really fascinating young outfielder. And they also got their new starting catcher, at least for the moment, in Carlos Narvaez. There was also a player to be named later in the deal. How those things work in Major League Baseball trades, you can put a player to be named later, and essentially allows the 2 teams to have some sort of construct where maybe it's about health of the player they traded for. Maybe it's about production of the player they traded for. Like, hey, if Adley is this good, you can pick from this list of prospects. If Adley's this good, you can pick from this list of better prospects. Usually in the offseason, you get that player to be named later. It's a way to just add more caveats to a deal based on how the major leaguer, the good player you traded for, how he performs for that team. It seemed like, though, with the Orioles and Red Sox, this caveat was based on Adley Rutschman's health, because Rutschman was on the injured list with a wrist injury on deadline day when the Red Sox traded for him, and he was not activated the next day, right? He spent another week on the injured list. He did not make his Red Sox debut until Tuesday night. I guess it was Monday or Tuesday night of this week. So the Red Sox were probably trying to hedge a little bit in terms of, hey, we want to make sure Adley is healthy. So my assumption is that the Red Sox said, hey, Harold Rivas, young outfielder, we know you want him. Because remember, the initial report of the deal also had Harold Rivas going to the Orioles, and then it was later switched out. I think Andy Kuska, the banner, had it first, that actually Rivas was not in the deal. Well, it turns out Rivas was like if this happens, you get Rivas. And because that addition was announced on Tuesday, the day Adley Rutschman was activated from the injured list and made his Red Sox debut, that tells me that the player to be named later was all contingent on when Adley Rutschman returned from the injured list. So I'm assuming there was some sort of timeline that, hey, if Adley returns by this date, so he's this healthy for us, you get Rivas. If he returns by this date, in September, you get this lesser player. And if somehow he misses the rest of the season, you get this even lesser player because we're getting less value out of Adley. It kind of makes sense from the Red Sox and Orioles side. Well, Adley was back in about a week. He was activated by the Sox on Tuesday, and that meant Harold Rivas is also in that trade. He is the player to be named later, also joining the Orioles system. So who is Harold Rivas? Well, he is an 18-year-old right-handed hitting outfield prospect who was a 2025 international amateur signing out of Venezuela by the Red Sox. They gave him a $950,000 signing bonus. It was their second highest bonus in that international class in 2025. He was really good in 46 games in the Dominican Summer League last year in his pro debut, was moved up to the Florida Complex League this year in rookie ball, and struggled a little bit more. 46 games, 198 plate appearances. Rivas slashed 241, 343, 429. That's an 85 WRC plus. So he was about 15% worse than league average in rookie ball. Hit 6 homers, walked at a 12% clip, struck out too much at 26%. He also stole 23 bases. Fangraphs at the time of the trade has him currently ranked as the 9th best prospect in the Red Sox system with a 40-plus future value on him. Seems to be questions about the hit tool. Again, he's already striking out a good amount in rookie ball, but he is only 18 years old. But there's a lot of projectable power in there in the body. It seems like tons of speed, really good defender, true center fielder, not just speed out there, but a really good arm. All scouting reports say gets great jumps on the ball. It gives him a really high floor as a good defensive center fielder. Eric Longenhagen, who covers prospects over at Fangraphs, said a max exit velocity of about 108 miles an hour this year. Really good bat speed for his age. Participating and really performing well against some of the high velocity that he's seen in rookie ball so far. He cut down on his ground balls. He cut down on his swing and miss rate since last season. Those are all good things. And Fangraphs wrote back in February that they actually projected Rivas to be a riser and to end up on their 2027 top 100 prospect list. So we'll see if that plays out for him as an Oriole, but another exciting prospect who will probably slot into the top 15 or 20 in the Orioles system. So another talented player who comes over. Again, he's only 18, so it's going to be a while before we would see him in the big leagues with the Orioles if we do, whether he makes it or he gets traded away in another deal. But another exciting prospect. Does it take away the hurt for me from trading Adley Rutschman to the Red Sox? No, it does not, but it makes the Orioles system even a little bit stronger than it was just a day before. And so they did end up getting Rivas, and they didn't have to take on Jarren Duran and his contract, because that was floated as a possibility at one point. And that would have, you thought I was crushed by this Adley trade already. If they would have also taken on Jarren Duran, I might have just folded the podcast after that. I don't think I could have podcasted if that would have happened, but it didn't. And the O's still got Harold Rivas to add to this trade. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like the show, you can support us here on YouTube with a like, comment, and a subscribe. And if you do subscribe, and this is a thank you for getting me over 11,000 subscribers, you can be entered in our giveaway to win the Adley Rutschman golfing bobblehead. That's right. 2 steps to enter. 1, subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube. 2, leave a comment on either today's YouTube video or any video this week telling me your favorite Adley Rutschman Orioles moment. Entries will close Friday at midnight. I'll draw the winner this weekend and announce it next week on the show to get the Adley Rutschman bobblehead. We've also got a mailbag episode coming up tomorrow to finish off the week, since the O's have Thursday off. So if you have mailbag questions about the O's, about Major League Baseball, about things outside of baseball, and willing to talk about whatever on the mailbag episode, best way to send those questions is to email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com, or you could join the Everydayer Club. For $5 per month, you get ad-free episodes, access to our Discord channel. You will get 2 bonus episodes per month as well. One of them is coming out this weekend, and more perks like priority access to mailbag questions. If you join the Everydayer Club and put your mailbag question in the Discord, you guarantee that it will be answered on that next mailbag episode. You can check out the Everydayer Club at lockedonorioles.supercast.com. Again, that'll do it for today's pod. If you're an audio listener as well, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, 5-star rating and review, subscribe, follow there, really helps the show out as well. Got the mailbag episode tomorrow, so make sure to send in those questions. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.